Natalie was right in the thick of a divorce when Anthony entered her life. Her ex, William, had walked out on her for a younger coworker, leaving Natalie to pick up the pieces. Their daughter, Victoria, had chosen to stay with her mother. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of divorce papers at a quiet cafe, Natalie crossed paths with Anthony. He noticed her, struck up a casual chat, and kindly asked if they could get to know each other. Emotionally drained and worn thin by everything she'd been dealing with, Natalie didn't have the energy to turn him down. To her surprise, Anthony turned out to be warm, easygoing, and refreshingly cheerful. When it came time to go their separate ways, Natalie found a spark of boldness within her and asked for his number. She couldn't wait to tell her friend, though the reaction wasn't exactly enthusiastic. Her friend voiced all kinds of worries. What if Anthony was some random creep or, worse, a psycho? But Natalie shrugged it off. "Aren't all men strangers at first?" she said. "Besides, I've got to keep living. I don't want to be alone forever." Soon enough, Natalie and Anthony were dating. He courted her like a true gentleman, always arriving with fresh flowers, taking her out to charming little places, and treating her with unexpected generosity. One day, he stunned her with a surprise: an all-expenses-paid seaside getaway. All she had to do was get a few days off work. And just like that, Natalie found herself basking in the sun and in Anthony's affection. After years with a husband who'd been stingy with both time and tenderness, this kind of attention felt almost surreal. Then something magical happened. As they sat by the shore watching the sun melt into the horizon, with glasses of cool white wine in hand, Anthony pulled out a small box and looked her in the eye. "Natalie," he said softly, "I want to spend the rest of my life watching sunsets with you." That was it. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she said, "yes." As soon as they got home, wedding plans were in full swing. Her friend, the same one who'd been skeptical before, was now brimming with curiosity. Meanwhile, Anthony told Natalie he'd been saving up for this day, and they could afford to throw a proper celebration. Natalie could hardly wrap her head around it. Her first wedding had been bare bones, no white dress, no big party. She and William had tied the knot right after college, when love was abundant, but money was scarce. Now things were so different. Sometimes she'd cry from sheer joy, overwhelmed by how beautifully life had turned around. And then one day her friend brought up a delicate topic. "Have you two talked about having more children?" she asked. Natalie, calm and confident, replied, "We have decided that Victoria is more than enough for us." "But," her friend pushed, "doesn't Anthony want a child of his own? I mean, Victoria has different blood, after all." "That's dumb." Natalie's mood shifted. Anthony had never once made Victoria feel like anything less than his own. He'd taken her out for ice cream, watched movies with her, picked her up from school, driven her to dance class, you name it. They talked it through and both agreed one child was enough. Once Victoria grew up, they dreamed of seeing the world together. Just the two of them. Another baby would only put that on hold. Plus, Natalie was already 35. The idea of going through pregnancy and sleepless nights again? No, thank you. Their wedding turned out to be an unforgettable event. Big, beautiful, and full of joy. The food was delicious. The champagne never stopped flowing, and the laughter carried into the night. The next morning, Anthony whipped up breakfast while Natalie wandered into the kitchen, still glowing. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, her cheek against his back. Anthony grinned. "So," he said, "how was your first night as my wife?" Natalie laughed. "Honestly, I thought some kind of magical change would happen, but it's just us. Still the same." Time passed and their bond only deepened. Their home was full of warmth, laughter, and shared dreams. One evening, as they were having dinner, Anthony turned to her and said gently, "Babe, I think it's time we visited my parents. They could use our help." Anthony's parents lived in a quiet village about an hour from the city. Being a devoted son, he often came to visit them, whether it was just to stay or at his mother's request. Natalie, who was always happy to join him, treasured these moments, and the couple enjoyed chatting during the trip. One morning, after a hearty breakfast, they set off. first stopping to drop their daughter off at Natalie's mother's house. Despite the torrential rain, the road was unexpectedly clear, which allowed Anthony to quickly get to his parents' house. The trip was filled with stories. Natalie talked about her new job, which she had started 4 months ago, and shared funny stories about her colleagues and superiors. As soon as she started mentioning a new project at work, disaster struck. In a split second, Anthony lost control of the car. It overturned and flew into a ditch. Natalie lost consciousness from a blow to her head, while Anthony, who apparently had a fractured rib cage and a nosebleed, tried to call an ambulance. However, before he could drive through, people appeared from the side of the road, rushing to help. Relieved, the couple waited for help to arrive. Quickly at the hospital, Anthony received treatment for his injuries, including a cut on his hand from the shattered glass. Natalie, on the other hand, underwent emergency surgery to stop the internal bleeding. While Anthony rested, the effects of the painkillers dulling his senses, a doctor came to speak with him. Several hours had passed since Natalie had been taken to surgery, and the doctor reported that while they had managed to halt the bleeding, they couldn't save the pregnancy. The news hit Anthony hard, leaving him in a state of shock and disbelief. The following day, when Anthony visited his wife, he was taken aback by her appearance. Bruises covered her body, and clear tubes from IVs ran into her arms. Though he had been told about the pregnancy loss, he chose not to tell Natalie the full extent of what had happened. They exchanged a few words, and then he left her to rest, his mind a storm of emotions. A week later, Anthony sat beside Natalie's bed and told her about the latest development, how they would need to buy a new car because the old one was beyond repair. As she listened, a small bittersweet smile crept onto her face. But then, without warning, she grabbed his hand and looked into his eyes with a weighty seriousness. She confessed that she had kept a secret, feeling it was a punishment for herself. She admitted to having deceived and betrayed him. Anthony nodded quietly, knowing exactly what she meant. He'd already suspected the truth from the very start. Yet despite the hurt, he couldn't quite understand why he hadn't left her already. Still clinging to his anger and unresolved feelings, Natalie's confession took another turn as she explained that she had met someone at work, and they had been intimate for a brief time, but after just 3 encounters, she had ended the affair. By then, though, it was too late. She was pregnant. Natalie was torn. Should she stay with her husband or let go of the unborn child? She couldn't make a choice, hoping somehow that time would work things out on its own. She confided in her colleagues who were aware of the affair, and before long, they had learned of her pregnancy. Surprisingly, Anthony, despite everything, told her he would support her and the child. But even as he said it, Natalie knew that soon enough, it would all come out in the open. No words were needed. Anthony said little, absorbing the weight of her revelation. He told her he would be there for her during her recovery, but after she was discharged, they would file for divorce. They followed through with this difficult decision. For Anthony, breaking the old rhythm of their life was not easy. He had become attached to both Natalie and her daughter, but he knew it was the only way forward. He made a concerted effort to push thoughts of her from his mind. There was only one time he heard anything about her again, when mutual acquaintances mentioned that Natalie had quit her job and moved to another city. It seemed she could no longer bear the proximity to the father of her unborn child. As for Anthony, he made a firm decision never to marry again. He had loved Natalie, but her betrayal was more than he could bear. He couldn't open his heart to anyone else. Love might forgive many things, but once it's gone, nothing else seemed to matter anymore. Cheating Secrets podcast like me